Hello, everybody. Let's give everybody a few minutes to get on the call. If you'd like to, you can introduce yourself using the chat box. Put your name and your organization and your organization's website. I love getting to see all the different kinds of organizations that join us for the power lunches. Thank you. Welcome, Nicole. Welcome, Cheryl. Welcome, Erin. This is so great to see all these websites. Definitely take a look. I'm going to mute myself. We'll give everybody about 5 minutes just to get on. We had a lot of registrants today, so feel free to introduce yourself, finish emails, and do work. And we'll be right back. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, everybody. All right. So I have not started yet. We're just letting people get on, giving them plenty of time. And then I still need to go over my update on our plan. So We are so happy to welcome you, Rachel.
Thank you. I apologize I was late. Apparently deciphering between time zones is a little rough for me, so I apologize about that.
It is rough for us all. All right, everybody. We ended up having to always put multiple time zones in our invitations, and now pretty soon we'll be out west, and the power lunch will be more like the power breakfast for our Arizona friends. So we didn't think about that when we were originally naming this. Hi, everybody. So we just wanted to give you a quick update on her plan. We do have a directory in 21 states now, and they're just initial directories, meaning that if you find out that there are missing resources, please go ahead and recommend to us who else we should be reaching out to. There's a recommendations form on herplan.org. And there's also just the ability, please, anytime you can copy my email. I'll put my email in the chat for everyone. It's cmullinscooley@herplan.org. And you can copy that on an email with another organization that you know of in your local area that you'd like to be on her plan, but they aren't on it yet. And if every one of you did that, we could really grow our map. A lot of times when we first reach out to people, we think, oh, they're not really sure who we are, what we're doing. Is it too good to be true that we're on a free directory map? And so it really does make a difference, those personal introductions, those personal recommendations. So please consider doing that for us today. And then I just wanted to take a moment. I know I usually go over the directory, but I'd like to just show everyone a little bit more about our church guide, which is available on herplan.org/community. Some of you may not know that you can actually download our church guide straight from online, and the national guide can apply to all states. And then we have some other state specific ones that's really the same guide. It just has one extra chapter. So if you want to put in your email, you can get access to this guide. If for some reason you'd like to have a print copy, just email me and request one with your address, and we'll get a print copy shipped to you within about a month. So you can see here the guide, the flipbook style with the nice pages that flip through. You can see our 7 categories of care. And as a reminder, our 7 categories are based on the 7 abortion triggers, which are the reasons why women think that they need an abortion. And we want to provide life-affirming alternatives for them. And so in this book, whereas our directory lists local service providers, this book is an ideas book. This book is meant to inspire churches, communities, leaders, or even small groups of dedicated women who really desire to step up their game in terms of helping to build the pro-life safety net. So in every single chapter, there's basic ideas on how to collaborate between a local assistance provider like you all and the church or local community. There's ways to see models of who's been providing direct services. So that might be good to inspire churches to start new ministries, or you could even take a look at it as an existing service provider to see if you'd like to expand your services in one of these areas. And these are proven models from across the country that we've pulled from. And then finally, education. Education is really meant to be an introduction, an on-ramp to further action. And so if a parish or small group isn't very well informed on a certain issue and how that issue impacts pregnancy and parenting, we do have recommendations available in that section. Sprinkled throughout, we also have stories of women who've had abortions, interesting did you know facts. And then we also talk to the pastors directly and talk to them about how it's a mutual relationship between them and a local assistance provider. And really they can take advantage of knowing about local assistance to help members of their flock and their community outreach. So I highly recommend downloading our Pathways Guide. Thank you so much for listening to my plan update. I'm going to turn things over to Rachel. We are so excited to have SRT services. I just got a wonderful packet in the mail from her with all my SRT services materials. I'm just been poring over it this morning. It arrived just in time. So we are really excited to have this very interesting conversation about a new paradigm of sexual trauma and a little bit broader look at abortion recovery. So Rachel, over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to say first, I apologize. Today has been a whirlwind and the stomach flu has hit me. So I'm going to try to power through, but I might go a little faster than I normally would, just for that reason. So I'm going to just share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Doesn't look like it's showing the whole thing. It just looks like there we go.
Okay, perfect. And then if I click to the next one, does that change it for you guys?
Nope. Didn't nothing
It
change.
sure does not. Okay, I was worried about that. Okay, so if you'll bear with me, I'm gonna shift something real quick, and then we'll get it situated.
Take your time. You win a Perseverant Award for doing this while you're sick. I'm so sorry. Everyone, check out srtservices.org. It's an absolutely wonderful collection of resources, and it explains some of the curriculums we're just going to touch on today. So I hope you all take advantage of that. And feel free to send me something, Rachel, if it's easier if I try sharing. It's always a little bit of technical difficulty. Sorry about that, everyone.
So I'm hoping that by hooking it through my TV, it'll work. See, my poor husband, he does all my technical stuff. So can we just have that on this screen?
It's always wonderful to have a techie husband.
Right. Thank goodness. So we can stop sharing.
It worked. Something worked.
Poor thing. He's clicking through all my, I basically have sorted all of my brain capacity on my computer. So I have about 12 tabs open, and it's not overly helpful, I suppose, but.
That happens to us all.
Okay, there we go.
Eileen, I love it. Our techie husband is Jesus. We can pray.
Let's see. I feel like I'm almost there. We're close.
There's abundant grace. Isn't it wonderful?
I appreciate it so much.
Jesus is the most graceful technological husband there is. Oh, it looks so pretty.
Oh, thank you. That's my kid's background for me. Okay, you guys can see that now.
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, goodness sakes, I apologize. That was a little bit more technical than I thought it was going to be. I really do appreciate being here. As she said, my name is Rachel, and I'm the development director with SRT Services. And I don't see her, but I think our programs director, Elizabeth Korobnik, is here as well, hopefully. But I am very excited to be able to share with all of you how we are helping to heal our communities. So the purpose of SRT Services is to create awareness regarding the emotional harm caused by sexually related trauma and provide a path to healing for those affected. Our vision is that any individual who's experienced sexually related trauma and desires healing will be aware of and have access to these programs that we offer. So much of our approach has been a process of stepping into the trauma of our participants and paying attention to what led to their trauma and how they responded to that trauma. When we started to notice trends and track the trauma, we were led down a road that actually took us away from the traditional PRC model. And this book, I know Cheney mentioned it and referenced it earlier, has been very instrumental in helping us to get to where we are today. Many of the questions and concepts that are outlined here are explained in more detail in this book. And it really just helps to explain and expand our approach to healing trauma in our community. And I highly encourage you, if you haven't read it, to pick up a copy and start there. So I heard this quote that said, you can't move from point A to point B without first explaining why point A is no longer acceptable. And for us, when we looked at point A and the full scope of what our community was facing, we knew we had to move. So we found that almost half of the adult US population has been affected by one or more of the 5 sexually related traumas. That's trauma due to sexual abuse or assault, trauma due to past abortion, trauma due to miscarriage or stillbirth, trauma due to unwanted pregnancy, and trauma due to STDs. And when the trauma is not processed, it lends itself to a whole host of symptoms and emotions, things like, addictions, hypersexuality on one end, and on the other end, complete avoidance of sex or physical touch, gay lesbian lifestyle, or avoiding people or dates that remind them of the trauma. And this can lead to these common emotions: anxiety, despair, guilt, shame, fear, and anger. What we're talking about is millions of people who've experienced trauma. And these traumas honestly don't tend to be ones that we address. There's not often as a culture, we just typically don't create space to talk about, especially sexual abuse or assault, past abortion, or miscarriage or stillbirth. And quite frankly, that is just a lot of people walking around wounded. So I want to just take a minute real quick and just help us understand, kind of fully understand the cycle that our clients are often stuck in. And I did a lot of research in Dr. Marie Dzelik. This is kind of her outline here. So it starts with an event. It can be a traumatic experience or physical pain. It'll include discomfort, distress, physiological pain or distress, often an anxiety response. There's fear, frustration, anger. For our clients, it would be, maybe they had a sexual assault or a past abortion or miscarriage or stillbirth. They may have just found out they're experiencing an unwanted pregnancy or have just been diagnosed with an STD. So to combat that, we tend to avoid. So psychological avoidance and behavioral avoidance with things like substances, food, high-risk behavior, sexually acting out, unhealthy relationships, gambling, overworking, overspending, extreme exercise. Technology is a big one we use to avoid. Essentially, we do whatever we can to avoid it, which honestly gives us temporary relief. It gives us a positive reinforcement, both psychologically and physiologically. It does make us feel better. It's not healthy, but it temporarily helps. The avoidance behavior provides a break from the distressing symptoms. The problem is that the temporary relief demands continual use, which leads to addictions. It becomes necessary to continually use to create the same amount of physiological and psychological responses that created the temporary relief. Then when you add in life complications, which often develop from continual use, it causes an increase of pain, distress, which leads us to avoid, which leads to temporary relief, which leads to continual use. You see how that cycle just continues. So how this can look for our clients is that someone who's experienced, let's say, sexual abuse or assault, they felt the pain, they're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, survival mode, essentially. And to avoid it, they might turn to riskier sexual behavior, which can increase the chances of STDs, unwanted pregnancy, and even abortions. So when this process is not interrupted, it keeps the cycle going. It takes them farther down the hole and adds trauma upon trauma. So this is the state that the clients are in when they come in our doors. Everyone, even the ones who appear to have it all together. The only difference is that their avoidance techniques are usually socially acceptable. Things like perfectionism and overachieving, overworking, things like that. I know for me, that was my trauma response was perfectionism, and I was really good at it. And it just took me a while to connect that what I was doing was avoiding, and I would get high praise because I was doing a good job, which gave me temporary relief. But then I needed to keep doing that. And then when life got in the way, it just created this weird cycle for me. So recognizing those socially acceptable poor coping skills and those socially unacceptable poor coping skills. So that's the thought process of our clients. So what do we do? I think understanding trauma and that there are so many wounded in our communities, we reach them in really specific ways. The first way is through our marketing model. So how do we get them in the door? How are we advertising to them? What verbiage are we using? Are we inadvertently adding a little bit of shame in the way that we're talking about the trauma that they've experienced? And then our life care model is, what do we do with them now that they're here? And how do we support them once they leave? And then through our direct healing programs. So this approach here is how we reach the wounded and traumatized in our communities. So our Trauma Resource Center will offer a holistic approach to processing sexually related trauma, utilizing our life care model. The life care model will help clients see how these traumas are not a singular event, but really have affected every area of their life. They come to understand how the trauma has affected their whole person, their decision-making processes, their behavior, and the way they function in relationships. So they'll be given a space to process their trauma through a series of self-evaluation tools, including our trauma screening tool. We're asking clients to take a look inward at all the possible ways that the trauma could have affected their lives. We use our brain dump, which is the emotional release that allows trauma to move from the emotional area of the brain to the rational area of the brain. A meaningful and effective healing plan must be done rationally. And the brain dump exercise encourages clients to freely express thoughts, feelings, challenges, barriers, anything associated with their sexually related trauma. And then we've just created a life wheel. We know that sexually related trauma can affect many areas of a person's life and result in a lack of healthy relationships. So the life wheel assessment is used to show genuine concern for the well-being of clients. This simple but effective tool provides a 360-degree holistic visual representation of our client's current reality of what is and compares it with the preferred reality of what could be. The client would rate key areas from 1 to 10 to populate this bird's eye view. The information will be used to formulate strategic questions and surface valuable information about key relationships, sources of strength, obstacles, challenges, their goals and dreams for the future. It's a very effective conversation tool. So these tools will be used to develop the client-directed care plan. The client will assess current realities as well as opportunities, and they will be connected. They'll compile a list of potential action steps that they will take after they've had an opportunity to process all of the options available to them. Each client will then be connected with a coach who will offer support and accountability as the client walks through the client-directed care plan. So here are some examples to consider. Maybe a single woman with an unwanted pregnancy. She has numerous choices available to her, including abortion, adoption, and parenting. None of these are easy and pain-free. Life has already changed for her dramatically, and she will experience hardship no matter what she chooses. And although we desperately want her to choose life, We will help her process each option available to her and arrive at the life decision she believes is best for her. Or consider a client in a domestic violence situation. While our goal would be to see them move away from that relationship and into a safe environment, we must lean on the client's needs first. So the client may feel stuck in the situation because of the need for housing or food assistance or funds. And so the life wheel especially is helpful for kind of fleshing out what those needs might be. And it just provides an overview of where can we start and what do we need to eventually get to a safe place. And we see based on the research that a client can't make a logical decision about life when they're stuck in that trauma cycle. So we're creating a space to slow down the panic and help her process logically the choices ahead of her. So our clients who have experienced the trauma due to sexual abuse or assault, past abortions, or miscarriage or stillbirth participate in free healing groups designed specifically to address each trauma. They are our Savanon, or Sexual Abuse Victims Anonymous, which is an 8-week healing program offered to those who've experienced emotional trauma from sexual abuse or assault. We have our Avanon, or Abortion Anonymous, which is an 8-week healing program offered to those who have experienced the emotional trauma from past abortion. And our Misanon, or Miscarriage or Stillbirth Anonymous, which is also an 8-week healing program offered to those who have walked through the emotional trauma of a miscarriage or stillbirth. So our free gender specific groups are offered both digitally and in person, where participants work through varied emotional symptoms, including anger, depression, shame, anxiety, addictions, and feelings of dirtiness. And our experienced trained facilitators are ready to assist in providing those affected a path towards healing. So what does this mean for you? And that's a great question. We essentially have 3 different tracks that we utilize to bring healing to our communities. One of our tracks is our Trauma Resource Center. One is our healing groups, and one is helping pregnancy resource centers transition to trauma resource centers. So to connect your clients to our healing groups, you would go to our website, click on the Programs and Services tab, and select the program that you need. And then when they fill out the inquiry form, put a box in the questions box that they're and just comment that they are connected to your center. So like I said, we do offer in-person, online, and a hybrid of both for our healing programs. We have actually PRCs that host their own in-person groups. And if that is something that you're interested in to host in your community, you would just find key people in your organization who have experienced one of the traumas and send them through our programs. They would attend a group, then through the vetting and training process would be able to facilitate. And that partnership is really quite a beautiful thing. And together we work to make sure that our groups are complete and have a full roster of participants. And so it's a process that we have been working on and kind of zeroing in and utilizing. So let me know if you have any questions about how that process works. Second thing I would say is to read the case for the SRT marketing model. What we're looking at is that less than 1/3 of 1% of our communities will experience an unwanted pregnancy. When we embrace healing sexually related trauma, that number jumps to 50% of our communities. And I'm hoping I can do this without too much of a technical kerfuffle, but I do want to share a quick video of an executive director of a PRC that caught the vision that they had, that we share, and have actually transitioned to a trauma resource center. So hang on just one second. Hopefully I can do this without too much of a
Always so powerful to hear a video. I hope it works.
okay, so make that full screen, and then let me come back here. Okay.
Okay.
Can you guys hear that?
Be separated. Okay. So
It's not quite coming through.
Okay.
It's like we can hear bits.
Whoops, that was the wrong way. If I turn the volume up a little bit,
how were you?
There
is
we
that
go.
better?
Yes.
Okay.
Still a little faint.
Get in contact with parents. We thought that we were having a meeting for just marketing and how we could better market centers. And when parents simply asked me the question, so what do you see? And I said, well, you know, just
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. Maybe you could share the link. People can watch it later.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
But tell us about it if you remember what she said.
Yeah. So essentially what she was excited about and what I get excited about is that by looking at becoming a trauma resource center and healing the community and reaching 50% of your community, what we look at is an offensive and a defensive approach to how we reduce the number of abortions within our communities and how that changes our view, how we relate to each other, how we relate to our coworkers, and how we're involved in our community. And that eventually changes our culture. And so I know there has been concern that it might be a mission drift is some of the terminology that has been used. But really, I think when we embrace healing sexually related trauma, it is the most effective way to fulfill your mission, to bring awareness about that cycle that can lead to abortion, and then offering support so we prevent abortions. And I think I will definitely send the link. And one of the things I think that she highlights, and one of the things that I find so fascinating, is that with this approach, it is almost hard to quantify the number of abortions we will prevent by helping people process their trauma before they get into an unwanted pregnancy. So that's kind of the gist of that video. I will, I will send it in a link afterward. I don't know if that would be easier to send to you, Cheney, or if it
Yes,
would
yeah,
be.
you can definitely, I'll put it in the wrap-up email.
Okay. So we have actually created and provide a transition plan if you are interested, that we walk step by step through this process of what that looks like. We offer free coaching and free marketing materials. And really, our goal with all three of these tracks is to partner with you to bring healing to your communities, however that looks for you. So I guess, are there any questions? I'll stop sharing and we can.
So feel free to put questions in the chat or the Q&A box. I'd love to just hear a little bit about the connections that you all have been finding between the different types of trauma, and how often, if you've experienced one, you may have also experienced another.
Yeah, this was part of the process. So back when we first launched our organization, it was only abortion recovery. And what we noticed and started to pay attention to was that many participants in our Abaddon class also had a sexual assault story. And so it ended up, as we started to pay attention and kind of follow these breadcrumbs of, well, how did that maybe play into some of your decision to that led you down the path where you felt like that was the only option for you? What did that look like? And then recognizing that some women that had started, so that's when we launched our Savanon class. And then what we noticed is those gals who came in through our Savanon class, some of them had an abortion story. And so starting to connect the pieces that, again, that trauma is not just an isolated singular event. It can sometimes inform how we make decisions, how we view life. I think it's one of those, when we get into situations, when you're talking to someone who has maybe experienced something traumatic and they're with somebody and you can see all the red flags, you can tell that the person that they're with is not meant for them, but they can't see it. And that's partly because they haven't processed it. We walk through the world living out of that emotional side of our brain, where the logical side might try to kick in occasionally, but our emotions are quite a bit stronger. And so it's got a hard fight. And so kind of following that process of, well, I wonder what would have happened if we had stepped in back here and helped process that, if it wouldn't have led to this. And so that's kind of how we started that process, was following really what our participants were saying. I think as we, especially nowadays, in psychology and in our culture, everyone is quite a bit more attuned to how trauma affects them and are definitely more open at this point than I think we've ever been in history about saying, hey, this thing was really hard for me and I'm not sure what to do with that. And so being able to come alongside so many people and walk along with them and say, hey, we know firsthand what that was like for you. Let's talk about it. So yeah, a lot of it was our own research and the lived experiences of our participants. And so that's kind of how we morphed into, let's address all these traumas.
Wow, we're getting so many great questions coming in. Starting just with the practical, is the Abanon program for both men and women?
Yes. Yep. So our Abanon is for both men and women, and our Savanon program is for both men and women. Currently, we just launched Missanon last year. And so we're working on, at this point, doing the research to see if a men's curriculum would be beneficial, or if there's a way that we can incorporate, spouses or partners into some of that process without creating a whole program for them, unless it's necessary, and then we will.
Are the curriculums different? Do they have gender specific groups? Are they together?
All gender specific. So we have curriculum designed specifically for women, and our curriculum designed specifically for men. So our men's program are led by men who have experienced sexual abuse or assault, or had an abortion. Maybe they didn't have it themselves, but drove their girlfriend, took their kid, that type of situation where they contributed to it. So that program is all led by men who have experienced those two traumas, just like our women's program is.
And what about the religiosity? That's really a unique situation with your curriculums. It's really kind of not faith-based nor non-faith-based. So can you say more about what being a faith-informed curriculum looks like?
Yeah, so we definitely walk the line of being both and neither. So it's a delicate balance. Our curriculum is not overtly religious, but we recognize that millions of people have gathered healing and walked a healing process with faith. And so part of what we feel our responsibility is to incorporate that. So it's not a requirement that you are a believer. It's not a requirement that you're not. In each of our curriculums, we do kind of put a Y in the road and say, hey, this is kind of where you're at. Where do you want to be? And we leave it up to them to decide. But we definitely present the gospel in it. We're not, and that's mainly because for us, without the help and hope of Jesus, there's really only so far you can go in your healing. I think the beautiful thing about our curriculum is that it's done in such a way that We've had so when I attended an Abaddon class, my first time when I went through it myself, we had a gal who she was practicing Wiccan, and she found it very helpful. There was a gal who was kind of like, I don't really know. And the way that and then of course there were believers in there as well. And so the way that it's designed is really to facilitate your own introspection about what you need, but we offer kind of that hope of Jesus. And so, yeah, it's both and not. Hopefully that clarifies and doesn't add more confusion, but.
So it's your own curriculum, and it's really designed for people that are not yet believers or new to faith. So it's different than, I would say, a lot of the other post-abortion Bible studies.
Yep.
So how successful is recruitment and getting men and women to participate in the groups?
So that kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. The way that we approach it is we don't necessarily go out and advertise. So most of our participants come word of mouth, and that has been incredibly successful for us. I find it interesting that when we go to churches and we present to them, here's what we do, here's who we are, we will definitely, I think there's a need and a longing for this type of healing. And so as we talk about it more and as we get out there more, it definitely brings the community in. And I'm always surprised at how many men come up and say, I was a part of this 30 years ago and I regret it. And so, yeah, some of it is word of mouth. I think, like I said, I think people are at a point right now where they are ready for healing. And so, but we have a fairly small staff. And so as we can, and we are able to, we go and present at churches and businesses. And so the other thing I think that it does when we look at healing sexually related trauma, as opposed to healing one particular thing, is that it opens the door for us to get into more places. And so no longer are we limited by the political climate. We are free to say, hey, this thing has affected your staff. Do you want us to come talk about it? And this is affecting your coworkers, and this is affecting your volunteers at church. And that has really just opened the door for us to be able to walk into places that we were not necessarily welcomed before.
Along those lines, there's a question here about whether you pursued offering these programs in conjunction with safe houses, shelters, domestic violence shelters, etc. As some of those realms, we definitely have some of those providers participating in her plan.
Yes. Yeah, we are local. We have a local nonprofit here that is designed and combats sex trafficking. And so we are in communication with them about how to build their programs, how to fit our Savanon and Abaddon program into it, because we know that is a huge piece of what they've walked through and what they've experienced. And so, yeah, it's a natural connection for us to come alongside and say, and to work with and to walk those women and men through those particular trauma healings. So yes, that's, we're always looking to develop those partnerships. Yeah.
Where are you in terms of your physical locations, and then both your headquarters and then the other places that have now adopted and been trained in your curriculum, and then how do your virtual groups work?
Great question. So we are based in Spokane, Washington. That's where I live. That's where the organization originated from. I think obviously the last few years have been a little, we'll say polarizing for us. COVID was actually a huge launching point for us because it did allow us to go virtual. And so we have classes that meet all over the United States. We have on staff a European director, and she oversees all of our Europe classes. And so we have classes that are happening all over the world. I facilitated one with a gal from Australia, a gal in Hawaii, and then some of us were in Spokane together. And so when we talk about hybrid groups, there's 4 of us sitting around a table and then the other 4 are zoomed in. And so it's this beautiful way to reach far more people than we ever thought we could. And so what our goal is 6 participants and 2 facilitators for each class. That's what our sweet spot is. We don't recommend that we go over that. And part of that is just the beauty of having a community, a small group of people who've experienced the same thing that you have. And so when we look at, let me go back to nationally, we have several pregnancy resource centers that have made that transition, several in Texas, Indiana. We have some that are in the process and are just starting that journey in a couple other states. And so what that looks like and really what it could look like for your PRC, for your organization that is, you're not at a point where you can take on becoming a trauma resource center, that's totally fine. How that would work is when you have, like I mentioned, key members of your organization, they can go through our program, they do the vetting process. The benefit of staying kind of in network with us is that they're your facilitators. But let's say in your community, you only have 2 participants who are ready to join a group. Well, we can supplement the other 4 so that you're up to a full class. And so that would be one of our hybrid groups. And so it kind of depends on the needs of your community, and we fill in. Then there's times we have facilitators all over the United States. They're in Connecticut, New York, Texas, here in Washington. I mean, they're located everywhere. So when we have a group that we're ready to launch, our facilitators could be in this last group I facilitated, my co-facilitator was in Texas. And so it really gives us the opportunity to reach so many more than if we were just isolated to Spokane. Hopefully that answered.
That's very helpful. How would you start the process of getting trained to be one of these facilitators and bring it to your community, obviously staying in contact with you all?
Yeah, so the first step would be, we do require all of our facilitators to have experience in that particular trauma that they're facilitating for. So if you want to facilitate for Savanon, you would need to have a sexual abuse story, Avanon, a past abortion, and Missanon, a miscarriage and stillbirth story. And some of that is just because of the level of empathy that you gain when you know the person sitting with you has walked through this process. It's hard to duplicate that with, it's just hard to do. So I would say start by attending one of our programs. That was the first if we had a checklist, that would be the first on it. Once you've done that, you can let your facilitator know, hey, I'd like to facilitate. We have a application and vetting process. And then we train you. And we just did a training on Monday, and I was talking to my coworker, and she was saying that it's funny because we do this, but then we're actually utilizing the things that we are teaching in our class. I'm facilitating a Savanon group right now, and we're having a hard time getting them to open up and kind of engage in dialogue. And so she goes, well, according to our training, we just need to maybe ask pointed questions. And so part of that training process is setting you up to make sure that you can, we give you common scenarios that we work through that we've seen, things like that kind of just set you up to be able to facilitate. And then you would co-facilitate with someone who has done it a couple times. So you kind of get your feet wet, so you know the process and how it works in a live class from the other end. And then, then we'd set you up. So that's kind of the process. That's how so it starts with attending one of our programs.
That's very practical. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
There's a question here about who developed the program and were their qualifications or experiences? Were they social workers, or what was their background? How did these curriculums get written and then adapted to both men and women?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fun story. So our executive director, he back before we were an organization, he was contracted with a local PRC. They said, here's the deal. We know that in Spokane, there's at least 2,000 abortions that happen. Why is no one coming to our recovery classes? What are we missing? Where is that gap? What is it? Why are they not? I mean, we'll get one or two who are who really want to walk through the healing process. So he took about 18 months and he did all sorts of research. He hung out at the PRC, he did his due diligence, and he came back and he said, really, this is a marketing issue. That's what you've got going on. And they said, thank you, but we're not doing anything about it. And so he went home, and he describes that he woke up one morning and the Holy Spirit said, so now that you know what are you going to do about it? And he said, well, nothing, because my contract's done. I'm finished. And of course, the Holy Spirit was like, well, that's the wrong answer. So now that you see the problem, let's step into it and figure out what we can do. And so he put together a team of writers and researchers, and they worked out that process of our first Abaddon for Women curriculum. So each of our programs have a story in there that started at someone in Spokane who shared their story and wants it to be used. And we match that with actionable healing steps that you can take. And so, sorry, so that process was through a team of dedicated, that's all they did was research. They found stories, and they wrote our curriculum for us. So it started, like I said, it started with Abaddon. And then as they saw the need for Savanon, then that team got back together and did more research and compiled the stories. And so that's kind of how our curriculum came to be. It was all written in-house. The lead writer on it has written several other books. And so he's a wonderful person. He's actually still on our board. So yeah, so that's how that came to be.
Wow, that's really a beautiful story. I wondered, do you have to be a pregnancy center to offer these trauma-informed services? I would assume not. What does it look like in another context, since we have so many different kinds of providers here?
Yeah, so really, I think the key piece of that is that you want to see your people healed. That's kind of the baseline requirement there. And then you would do the same is if you want to host through your organization, you'd send your key people through our programs and our training process, and then you would be able to start hosting, or you would connect your clients directly to our website, and they go through our intake process and we connect them with the group. And part of why it's helpful to have those notes that, hey, they're connected to this organization, is that then we can follow up, and you can follow up with them. And, hey, your first class was supposed to be last week. How'd it go? To really build some connection and support and communication through the process on your end and on our end. So yeah, it's not a requirement that you're a PRC or a TRC. Really, our goal is healing the wounded in our communities.
Beautiful. Could you say a little bit more about Miss-a-non and its relationship to the other two? I know it's the newest one, so what brought that one about?
Yeah, so that one, like I said, when we look at sexually related trauma, there's a couple criteria. One is that it is part of the reproductive unit. You have to have sex to have that particular trauma. And so what we found was that before we launched it, that was a gap that we were missing. I think especially with miscarriage and stillbirth, they are I think you mentioned a disenfranchised grief. That is, we don't even know how to talk about it amongst ourselves. It's hard to know how to bring up that conversation. One of my coworkers, she has experienced a miscarriage. And so for her to be able to have a space to say, this matter to me, and I'm grieving the loss of what could have been with this child, and to provide a space, because they really, I think the way that we all respond to trauma is fairly universal. What traumatizes me might not traumatize you, and what traumatizes you might not traumatize me. The way we respond to it typically manifests and plays out in a lot of the same kind of ways. And so being able to say, I understand what you're going through, and I empathize, and you should be able to talk about this. This should be a conversation that we're having more than what we're having. And so, yeah, that was kind of where that stemmed from, is that it was all part of that reproductive kind of core unit that we just are all woefully missing. That's kind of where that came from.
Do you anticipate more types of curriculums for other types of sexual traumas emerging in the future?
Yes. There, as things come up, I am keeping a running list of curriculum that we need right now. One of our biggest needs is a curriculum for youth, which is unfortunate, but a curriculum for minors who have experienced sexual abuse or assault. And so it's disgusting and hurtful, and it makes me angry that we even need it. But as we kind of dive into this and lean in a little bit more, those needs come up. And so I'm keeping I have a running list. Every once in a while I go to my boss and I'm like, hey, so I just added another one. Here we are. So yeah, yes.
Oh, this is a great question. It says, I do not understand your answer to why are people not coming to the post-abortion class? It's a marketing issue. Can you explain?
Yeah. So one of the things that he found in all of his research, and when we look at 1/3 of 1% of our communities that we're trying to reach, is almost a logistical marketing nightmare. Where do we put the billboards? How do we get enough word out? And I think historically, we have, well, I got to think about how to say that, because sometimes the services we offer are based on the assumption that she's keeping her baby. And I know we had a staff member who, she lived in Yakima, and she said, everyone knew that their local PRC was the place you go to get talked out of an abortion. And so when we're looking at how we market, how we advertise ourselves to be able to offer support to someone who's not even sure she wants to stay pregnant. And so that kind of, that was the start of it. And then I think it has morphed into being able to articulate to the community that your choices are your own. Obviously, we believe in life and we want you to choose life, but that is still your choice. We recognize that abortion is harmful, and we will not in good conscience recommend that, because that adds trauma upon trauma. But we also recognize that some people, they're not at a place where they can hear that. And so for them, it offers a space where we can say, good or bad, you made your choice, but let's deal with the fallout from it, because we know that there is trauma associated to abortion. And so, yeah, that's kind of what we were looking at. And I'm not saying that I know there's other places that you have probably marketed well. Our local PRC did not. So that was part of why his response to them. I'm sure if he consulted with others around the nation, that answer would probably be different. For our local one, they were not marketing well.
It's fascinating. I was reading an excerpt this morning. It was just an interesting perspective. I mean, like you said, there are different perspectives, and it's okay within our community to have different ideas and discussions about these things. But I did find this interesting. He said, we hold ourselves out to be pregnancy resource and care centers, and our primary target is women who do not want to be pregnant, much less want pregnancy care or resources. Yes, you read that correctly. We are trying to find the needle in the haystack. Only 0.31% of the population of our service area will be an unwanted pregnancy this year. In the minds of the pregnant woman or couple, an unwanted pregnancy is a problem. It is very traumatic. If we are honest with ourselves, we only address the woman's trauma to the extent it is necessary to save the baby. The mother does not feel like she's being saved from her trauma when our focus is mostly about the child she carries. I've been there, done that. Our mission above all else is to save the baby. Unfortunately, our true mission is unwittingly communicated in our marketing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that saving babies is a bad mission. I'm just saying that when the mother thinks we are more concerned about the child than we are about her, it is a marketing challenge. So I just thought that was really interesting. Yes, so it's just food for thought, regardless of if you agree or disagree. It's a really good food for thought.
Right.
Yes, the book, the link to the book will be in the wrap up along with the video link that Rachel's going to send me. And I'll link to the website for SRT services as well. As a reminder, do email me. info@herplan.org also comes to me. Email me to connect me with local service providers in your community. And if you would like a mailed copy of our Pathways Guide for Churches. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be out next month, but Anna Slayton will be leading the power lunch on infant loss, miscarriage, and stillbirth, the perfect follow-up to this lunch. Thank you so much, Rachel, for being with us. God bless
Yes,
you.
thank
all.
you.
Thank you all.